Hello, good evening. Welcome, everyone. It is 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's time to start talking about building our world, starting the world building process as we develop the stories for our NaNoWriMo. I'm excited. World building is one of my favorite parts of the process, but it's important to me because it helps me develop the character and the plot as well. So if you joined us for the first video in the series on Monday, or whenever you're watching this, the first video on building out your story idea, we ended up with a vision statement. So hopefully you all have worked on the vision statement. It is just these things that we put in place to make things easier for us as we go along. So I hope y'all are ready to do some brainstorming, do some world building, and ideally be world building to figure out your character and your plot and doing them together. And this is going to be a theme over and over again in the way that I approach this. So I hope that you have your any libations. I have tea. I always get ready to write with tea. And let me know what kind of what your favorite writing drink of choice is. I know a lot of people are coffee drinkers. It may or may not be coffee time wherever you are, but I always like to get my space together. I take a few deep breaths and get ready to be creative. And hopefully, like for me, it's the end of the day, so I'm a little bit tired. But sometimes being creative is easier when you're tired. So Dragon Maiden has cherry Coke. I thought that said cherry cake at first. I was like, either one is great. Okay, so let us get started. So the first thing I wanted to go over was brainstorming elements of the world building. And I'm basically going to go through the world building checklist that I have. You can download it for free. The link is in the description of the video. And just start getting an idea of the things that I know, what I don't know, what I want to figure out, ideas that I might have, threads that I might want to pull on, and gather those and write them down. So Deb is a sweet tea drinker. Wandering Lynn, sparkling water or hot tea? Yes, I have hot tea, always hot tea. I went to the dentist this week and, she was like scraping the stains from my teeth, being like, you drink a lot of tea or coffee? And I'm like, yes, I drink a lot of tea. And then let me know if there are any audio issues. Hopefully I have the headphones in, which I don't love wearing, but I know it's better for audio. So, oh, and Patricia Pete is lemon tea. I have lemon ginger right now. At the end of the day, I'm getting a little scratchy. Lemon ginger is always a good tea for me. So I will share my screen for this. So yeah, going through so to review, the story that I'm working on is a fantasy romance. What I know about it is I want a band of warriors who basically hire a young woman who has been working as a maid in a hotel or an inn or something. And she's hired to work in their home. Like they all live together in this big like mansion or a house. And eventually she's going to discover that the secret world of supernatural creatures, these warriors are these creatures. She is a creature of a different something, and she has power. And so my vision statement, just to review, was that I want to write a story about a young woman who is taken from her life of drudgery into a magical world full of mystery and wonder, and discovers something important about herself and her origin. I want readers to feel hopeful after reading the story. So this is sort of my North Star, my guiding light of what I know about this so far. Now, everyone's going to be in different places with your story. If it's like a brand new story, or you're writing something that's a continuation of a series or an ongoing world that you have, hopefully this will be helpful no matter where you are. All right, so first part of getting our worlds together. All right, so this is the location. So if you are, a lot of you I know from last time were writing speculative fiction, whether it's fantasy or science fiction. And if you are writing something that takes place in our world, this becomes easier in terms of some of these questions. But some of them are actually still really important, regardless of kind of genre, what time period you're in. So I'm going through Earth or not Earth. So for the fantasy people, are we, this is what it says, is it Earth or not Earth? Mine, it's going to be very Earth-like. I don't think I'm doing something set in our world precisely. It's going to be a world very similar to our own, but I would love to, for this story, dive in more into building something new, something analogous to ours. I'm thinking a good comp is The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon, which is a book I loved. And it's a modern-ish time period, a world very similar to ours, but the technology is different. In that world, there are talking animals and there are demigods. And but I don't know if there were no cell phones. I don't think there was, because the whole story of that book was like writing letters. So there were certain technology differences. And I like that idea of kind of building a world that in some ways is very similar. That whole story is about a woman whose family is undertakers. So like she's in the family business. And so there's undertakers, there's modern-ish. It seems like it would be about within 30 years or so of our world, but the technology is different. So that seems like a fun thing for me to do. I would love to dive into something like that. So it's going to be Earth adjacent, but not Earth. And then time period for the story that I am working on, it will be, that's a good question. I have played around with time periods. A lot of my books, my epic fantasy series is alternate 1920s. And then I have The Monsters We Defy, which was my last traditionally published book, which was the actual 1920s in our or on Earth, even though it was a fantasy story. And then I've played around with other versions of Earth, like my series, The Bliss Wars, which is another version of Earth set in San Francisco in the future, dystopian. So I've gone around a lot. Sometimes when I'm doing something new, I like to say, what haven't I done before? Like, what would be new ground to cover? And I'm kind of thinking alternate 1950s. That just actually popped into my head, but it's kind of like the aesthetic. And I'll talk about when we talk about inspiration. Um, I just want something a little classic, a little retro in terms of the aesthetic that I'm building, but some level of technology. And having played around with that in Earthsinger Chronicles with an alternate version of the 20s, doing an alternate version of the 50s in this secondary world, I don't know, it just seems cool. Geography. Is geography going to going to become important? So some of these questions are going to be like, oh, I think that would be fun. That would be cool. That would be cool to read about. I think my readers would enjoy that. That is kind of what I've been talking about. But other questions that we'll go through in terms of world building are, what do we know about the story so far? And it's going to depend on how much of this you have in your head already. I'm starting from a very basic place. I know very little. It's a romance. So I know the basic beats of a romance. It's going to have a fantasy element and an adventure element, because I want this to be about a band of warriors. So there's some element of adventure and fighting and battles that's going to be taking place, but I don't think I want that to be the focus. And so as I'm building the world, I'm thinking about the tone that I want the books to have, and comps help. So like I had the comp of The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy, which is, I believe, considered like a cozy romantasy, which I talked about in the last video. And as I think more about the story, I just keep coming back to that. So one way to, if you have a lot of ideas and you can't figure out how to make a decision, sometimes it's cool factor, and sometimes it's, what is the thing that I just can't let go of? Like it's tugging at me. A lot of times an idea or some element will just be pulling at you. And I feel like following those threads, following the thing that wants attention is a way to make decisions, because it can be very difficult in writing to make all the decisions. Like you're at every step of the way, there's a million ways it could go. So we have to figure out a way to filter and take down everything, all possibilities, and funnel it down into what I'm actually going to be doing. And of course we change our minds when we need to, but this is like the through line. So I've got the North Star of my vision statement. I can keep coming back to that. The vision statement includes things like wonder and mystery and hope. So how do I make sure the decisions I'm making about my world building um, relate and coincide with the vision statement? And let me know at any point if you have any questions. So Deb says that she curated a list of comps. Yes, that is great. Comps is and using your Goodreads list is super smart. I've been thinking about that too, like over the past couple of days, like what other books could this be like? Where does it fit on the shelf? We talked about that in the last time. So awesome. All right, climate and weather. I kind of skipped over geography. Let's maybe do that together. Now, in the story that I have in mind, I have some warriors. I have an idea that they're fighting bad guys, obviously. I'm going to name all of them later in the process. I don't have, for me, now is not a time to come up with names. I'm sort of thinking of them as being like demons, but I doubt I will actually call them demons. I'd rather invent something or maybe find a mythology to use or something, but I don't know yet. So we've got our warriors fighting the bad guys, and what are they fighting about? That's always the question. It's like, what is this? Is there a war? What is the war over? And we can go and dive into research or just our knowledge of real life. What do countries fight over? Big war happening right now, of course, is Ukraine and Russia. Now, I don't really know that much about it, honestly, but I feel like there's Crimea, which I vaguely know about, and they're fighting over territory and resources. I know Ukraine is a big wheat producer, they're big farmland, so maybe Russia wants that. Whatever the resources are, or historical conflict, they feel like Crimea is supposed to be theirs, apparently. We can go and do research on real life conflicts and find reasons for conflicts, for wars, for battles, if you're doing an adventure type of story. Whatever the conflict is, basing it in reality is going to make it easier for you, is going to give you inspiration and things to pull from. So, is it a geographical conflict with these warriors and these potential demons? Because they're supernatural, and we know that the warriors live in our world, and I guess the demons at some point have to climb into our world. Maybe, but maybe it's some other sort of resource. We talk about natural resources on this list. Is it a magical resource? Is it power? Or are the warriors just trying to protect our world from these creatures coming in, which is sort of a traditional kind of trope if you're dealing with this. So that might be a good place to start because it feels like it makes the most sense. It's not a heavy lift. Um, you have to kind of determine how much you want to do from scratch and how much you want to shortcut. So if I give these demon-like creatures, people will understand what that means. They're from some other realm, dimension, hell, whatever, trying to come in and take over our world. And then we have a set of warriors who wants to stop them. That's easy. Everyone understands that. I can spend my world building energy in other places that I think are more interesting. So that's like a personal choice that you have to make. And then climate and weather. I don't know if I'm going to do anything interesting with that. There are plenty of examples of stories where climate and weather are really important to the conflict and to the plot and to the characters. But I don't know. That's not really speaking to me right now. But that's something I can always come back to. And I'm thinking of a book like N.K. Jemisin's Fifth Season, which is very like geography, climate. There's huge climate changes. The seasons are these big destructive forces that were very important in that story. And so, yeah, different stories are going to require different things. But I don't know that in mine that I'm building anything like that is calling to me. So, yeah, that's the location. Earth-like. I'm thinking small townish with this sort of gothic warrior house set up aside from other people. But those are just like impressions I'm getting as I work through the story. All right, next up is the history, brainstorming the history of this world. So if you chose Earth, you have history already baked in, but like the specific place that you are, how does the history of that country or state or city or town or whatever come into play if it does? To the age, this is an Earth-like place, so we're going to just everything is going to be very much like Earth until I say it's not, essentially. And I kind of would have to figure out in the story what are the differences. Like, do I want to go like have some other species, like a talking animal, or like um, I just thought of the movie Tank Girl, which is very old, but it was one of my favorite movies for a long time. And they had those I guess it was Earth, but they had like genetically mutated kangaroo men or something. It's been a million years since I've seen it. So, are there other creatures? Do I want to have some sort of fantastical creature? And we've already talked about in the story, like, okay, the warriors are some kind of creature. My heroine is. So, yeah, it would make sense maybe to have others, and maybe they're disguised. And part of the mystery of my heroine figuring out who she is to uncover other people who are more than they seem. That could be an interesting and then so the history would be okay, who are these people? Where do they come from? There's actually another slide about people and races that gets more into that. But this place, how is it settled? Are there myths and legends, disasters and wars, and the calendar? In this case, I like doing different calendars and different names of days or months to underscore that this is a place like ours, but it is different. It's like slightly left. So, Yeah, Deb asks something kind of similar. Can the world be like ours, but extra, alternate Earth circa 2050? Absolutely. Yeah. Like how and what is extra about it? So is it just that it's in the future? Was there something maybe around now that over the course of the next 30 years veers them off? Or it can be fun to figure out what is the difference between it, what makes it alternate, other than the fact that you're just imagining it in the future. um, like alternate histories are fun for that. So you can do an alternate history that, a historical event that changed that affects the future. So what if, uh, popular alternate histories like the Man in the High Castle, I think that's what it's called, the Man in the High Tower, the Man in the High Castle, which is, what if the Nazis won World War II? Um, or it doesn't have to be that drastic. So yeah. So Deb says that magic used to be plentiful and it went away and now it's back. That's awesome. That sounds really cool. I love that idea. So yeah, that's a great way to do it too. And so that brings to mind magic. We're going to talk about magic on another slide, but is the history of this, is there magic in the world? How hidden is it in terms of the story that I'm building? And how does that veer off? Like what would that mean? Like magic used to be plentiful. So in this example of Deb's story, magic used to be plentiful. It went away. So you're going to have to figure out, why did it go away? Why did it come back? Are those important things in your plot? Are your characters involved in that? Or are they just like victims or bystanders of that? Where does the story lie? Because there is a story in someone's bringing it back, or there's a story that now that it's back and what do we do? And it messed up everything, or it made everything better. Like so many ways you can go, so many choices. But I love that premise. I think that's really cool. Um, yeah, myths and legends are also fun. If you are a fan of myths and legends, of diving into real mythology from different cultures, I like doing that and seeing, can I base, is there a story I can base something off of? I do like grounding everything that I do. So if I can find grounding in a way that is not like just copying it. So personally, there's great examples of people doing this, but I'm not a fan of just like, okay, I'm going to do the Roman gods or the Greek gods, and this is going to be Zeus, and we're going to have a story about Zeus. Like I said, great examples, other authors doing that. That's super cool, but like that's not something that I'm personally interested in. So I like to take mythology and then twist it and change it and like remix it. And so thinking about myths and how do you create new myths and legends, and how do they, and specifically, how do they affect the story you're telling? So in my story example, I need to figure out at some point how these warriors meet my heroine, who is, they meet her at this hotel where she works, and how they identify her, because I want them to know that she is something special that she doesn't know, because she doesn't know anything about the magical world. And so, are there legends? Is there, the chosen one comes to mind. I don't know if I want to do a chosen one because I feel like it's a little bit, done, but it's a trope of fantasy. It's like a mainstay of fantasy, so there's nothing wrong with doing that. Um, okay, Dragon Maiden 84 says that I'm struggling with the Regency World, how much to make up and how much to reference. So is your story at all speculative, or it's just the real Regency? And if it's the real Regency, you're not having magic, it's not fantasy, it's just historical, then it's like how, the real Regency is might not be so palatable to modern readers. And a lot of historical writers are not changing it, but kind of softening things and, showing us how they want it to be, or it is always slightly different. Yeah. And Dragon Maiden says that getting, reading about the wars, falling into the black hole of history, the research can get away from you. Like I've had that happen. And so you kind of have to research with a purpose. So, okay, you're adding speculative, you're adding ghosts to the real Regency. Ghosts, still, that's speculative, but like, okay, it's still based in ours. You're not doing any kind of alternate route. So if you can, and I know it's hard because if you love to research and if you fall down the rabbit holes and you're finding all this great stuff, but trying to say, I'm looking for this, and when I find it, I'm going to stop researching, right? Like you find enough, and then use it, like put it in the stew and to build your own world. Um, you're going to be creating it from scratch to a degree anyway, because your reader is going to have different levels of familiarity with the Regency era, and so you're going to be explaining things, and so you choose how to explain and what to explain and how it affects your characters. And so really, and in the next video, we're talking really about weaving world, character, and plot together. But I find it helpful to ground everything in character. So in terms of how much to make up, what do you need the reader to know to understand your character and to understand the growth, the arc that they go on? Um, so hopefully that's helpful. Um, let's see. Zakia asks, how do you feel about using AI to assist with researching? In general, I am pro AI for researching. I mean, I'm pro AI in general. I think that it's really helpful to brainstorm, even. I found it will give you like things that will spark something that didn't occur in your own brain. So you have to double check everything that it gives you because it's not 100% accurate, but it can be easy to just open up ChatGPT and ask, "Hey, what did they call underwear in the Regency era or something?" Or like whatever you're researching, and then it'll give you something uh, that might help you dig a little deeper and verify it. So I am not at all anti-AI. I I do use it for brainstorming. I do use it for marketing and stuff like that. I like writing from scratch myself, so I plan to write these books myself. But like I'm pretty cool with it. Okay. Um, people and races. So we talked a little bit about this, but if you're doing speculative, are there other species? Are there other beings, even in our world? What races and ethnicities are you including? I do a presentation about this where if you're writing historical, there were Black and Brown people in Europe at all times in history. And so it is a choice to include them or not to include them. But you're making choices about who's populating your world, regardless of whether you're creating the world from scratch or not. And when you're doing it from scratch, when you're creating a new world, I like to think about where these people came from and looking at, once again, real history, real um, migration of people. How did people come to be in this land? Where did they come from? If you're populating your world with people who look different from each other, is that because of evolution? Is it because of magic? Is it because some of them are aliens? Or you get to choose all of that stuff. And allies and enemies of different groups, factions, nations. Since I'm doing a story where there's war, we have these sort of races. And I have my warriors who I want to be like created, um, like people who like merged, or I don't know if they're lab grown or something created. They're not just regular elves or regular whatever. And allies and enemies, they're guardians, they're protective, and they're protecting us, they're protecting our world from these beings who are trying to encroach. So what that kind of starts me asking other questions. Like as you go through these and brainstorm the list, I like to record all the questions that it brings up so that I can think about them later, because you can't do it all at once. So like, yeah, what do I know about these enemies, and what are the stakes of the story? What happens if these warriors fail in their duty? And then, that's a great opportunity for plot. It's like, how does the arrival of my heroine put this duty in peril and make it more difficult? You're always looking for opportunities for conflict, for opportunities to make things worse and to raise the stakes. So that's just the trajectory of a story. How can I raise the stakes? How can I keep readers turning the pages within this idea that I have? All right, customs and culture. And this is a big deal too, because once again, everything here is just opportunities for conflict. Where do people disagree? A lot of times, customs and culture are why we fight and why we disagree. There's plenty of wars over religion, language, habits, all of these things. So, how can I put them in my story to make reasons why people disagree, why they don't get along, why they might want to fight or war. And then also, alternatively, what brings them together. And the stories that I like to tell are about crossing divides and ultimately finding ways for people to come together. So asking like, you know, with each of these individual groups that I'm going to create, whether it's a supernatural race of beings or a town, what are the customs and habits? What are the social mores? How do families work in these groups and social groups? What do they value? What do they think is important? That goes into so much about the writing and about the world that you're building. And then if I'm creating a language, if they speak something different, how does it sound? The religion, are there rituals? Is there an opportunity for a religious conflict, or even just not even a religion per se, but beliefs and ceremonies that they think are important? I can think of like, okay, there's warriors and they assign special properties to their swords or something. Is there a ritual that they do before they go into battle? And then in education, who gets educated? How do you learn? Are certain groups not allowed to be educated? Is it illegal for certain groups to get educated? Things like that. Economics and government, another place where, depending on the type of story that you're telling, huge opportunity for conflict, for interpersonal conflict, and for world conflict, like big level, big stakes, government and economics. So, who's in charge? Who's in charge, like even on the micro level? Does my band of warriors have a leader? Generally, they would. They'd have some kind of general. Um, and how that person get to be in charge? Does everyone agree that they should be in charge? On a macro level, uh, yeah, government, is there a king, a president? Are they a tyrant? Economic systems, who has money? How do you get jobs? What happens? What is the law enforcement? A lot of times I won't even think about this until I'm deep in the story and writing and realize, what happens if they break the law? Where are the prisons? How does this work? What are they called? What are the police called, or the military or whatever? Um, so that's something that I'll have to think about in this alternate version of the world. Is there, like, let's call them like mundane people who don't know anything about the magical world? Um, is there, if you accidentally spill the beans to a mundane person, is there some kind of law enforcement that comes and gets you? Is there a punishment for that? What are the stakes? So these are big questions I have to kind of figure out as I go along. And kind of going through this process, just initially thinking them through and figuring out, okay, I don't know this, I don't know this. As you go along through the process in the coming weeks of like planning the story, I feel like you're going to be on the lookout. Like now that you're aware of these things, you're going to be on the lookout and you'll find inspiration and ideas from a variety of places. So some of this is like seeding the ground, asking the questions, knowing you're not going to have a lot of answers yet. Maybe you do, but opening yourself up to the way that you're going to get answers and inspiration in the future. So Deb says that I'm afraid of getting lost in the world building and never getting to the actual writing, which is a problem that many people have. And I definitely have seen that a lot. I feel the pain. I understand it. World building can be fun, but sort of just like what, when, talking about the research and getting lost in the research, there's a lot of places to get lost where you're not actually doing the writing. And so world building with a purpose. My philosophy of world building is to do what you need, to only do what you need. So do I need to know all of the economics and government of this country that they're in? I don't know if the country's government will come into play in the story, maybe. And when I need to know that, I will figure it out. I'm bringing it up as a topic for now. At the moment, it doesn't seem as super important. I think that if most of the story is going to take place in this house in a small town, then maybe the government, like the mayor of the town, could be an issue, and I have to focus there. But I like to build everything together, so the world, the plot, and the characters, just because of that reason, so that I don't spend weeks, months, years building a world, and I never write. So I do as little as possible that will give me what I need. And that is my advice. Like, think about it, Jot some notes down, brainstorm, but don't spend an eternity on the world building because the writing won't get done that way. And we want to be writing, we want to be shipping. Um, for me, having deadlines really helps with this. But if you are pre-published or they're not in a situation where you have a hard deadline, is there a way to create deadlines? Is there a way to create accountability? Sometimes that's critique groups. Like if someone is expecting 20 pages from you in 3 weeks, that can be really helpful psychologically. So kind of self-hacking so that you don't get pull down that rabbit hole of endless world building or endless research without actually writing. Daily life is something else to think about. And daily life, the people who live in this place, what do they do? What is the level of technology that you've decided on? So if you're in the Regency, you kind of have an idea of the carriages and I don't know exactly when region. Did they have telegraphs or trains? I think that was too early, right? So like what is the technology that you're dealing with and how will that affect the plot and the characters? Because if it's a different story if something happens and the character has to take a long carriage ride across England, or they could just hop on the train, and that's more later 1800s or whatever. And then in a fantastical world too, what if you're in the future, like our alternate Earth in 2050? What is the technology? So 30 years, things are happening so fast now. What is it going to look like? Are we going to have our flying cars? Are we going to just have our self-driving cars? I'm sure will be probably the norm unless, something strange happens. They seem to be, no one really wants them, but they're here anyway. And they're not, it's kind of like AI. Like nobody really wanted it, but it's here. We got to deal with it. And it's probably just going to be more prevalent in the future. Um, Health and medicine. So who are the doctors? Are there wise women? Are there shaman? Are there physicians and surgeons? That kind of thing. Art, fashion, food, and supplies. Just kind of thinking about, do any of these things come into play in a big way, or are they little details that you're going to be peppering through the story as you write it to give it more life and to fill it out? And magic. So if it is a speculative story, then this is generally how I create a magic system. And some of this comes from Holly Black, the author I found something that she talked about magic. And, I like a more structured magic system where there are rules, not too many rules, but just enough so that I know what it can do and know how it can solve my problems. So usually a type is active or passive. You're actively casting a spell or, magic just wafts from your pores. Internal or external, does the magic user, is it an ability that's innate or do they require a amulet or, magical cloak or something? The technique, it can be any or all of these things: thought, speech, gesture, or material. So do they think it? Do they have to say special words? Is it like in Liber Bardugo, they have special gestures that they need to make, or there's special materials that are imbued with magic? The range, can you do things across the globe, or is it only close by? The consequences and costs, this is a big one. This one is really important to the plot also, and also the character development, because depending on the consequences you choose, that can change. I mean, that could be your plot. You could build a whole story just around the cost of magic. Um, what are magic users called? And how are they treated? Are they adored? Are they feared? Why have they taken over the world? If not, why not? And then the regulation and how do people react to them? It's kind of in the same vein. Okay, so these are the main world building topics. And then the last one is just questions. At this stage, if you're still early in brainstorming your story and developing it, there's a lot of questions you're going to have. And hopefully this process will give you more questions. And over the course of building it out, we're going to be answering the question. So have a file. I keep a special file inside of Scrivener, which is the program I used to write with, that has questions that I will need to figure out at some point, hopefully. And some of the writing is, referring to those questions, answering them, figuring them out, which ones, some of them don't need answers. Another way to not get caught up in all of this and make sure you're getting to the writing is prioritizing. So like there's things I need to know And there's things that I might need to know, but I don't need to know them now. So what do I need to know first? So, like for me in my story, I think I do need to figure out the basis of the conflict. What are the stakes of these warriors? How does my heroine entering the picture blow everything up? Because, like, I think inciting incident, something big has to happen that changes things. Stories are about change, and at every point, there's going to be changes either to the character or to the world if the character is exerting their will on the world. And yeah, the that is something that is important to think about. So make a list of questions. You don't always have to answer all of them. So the next thing I wanted to go over, and this, let me know if there's any questions that you have for me. I'm going to swap this out for Scapple. So I start brainstorming, and I'll just leave this up, I guess. Give me a second. I have too many screens. All right, there we go. Okay, so I listed in the description a couple of different mind mapping software. I've used all of them at one point or another, and I'll just hold on. I'll show you that in a second. Um, so I'm going to use Scapple tonight. Scapple they have like a long free trial. It's for Windows and Mac. Whimsical and Miro are web-based tools, and the functionality is a little bit different. I decided to use Scapple because I can link many boxes to one, but yeah, they all work well. And I find it helpful to brainstorm with a mind map and just kind of sort of capture all of the ideas. This also helps with the theme. I talked a little bit about theme in the last video, and I do like to kind of identify the theme early on for most projects. So for this one, I think it might be helpful. That is not, something that everyone needs to do. If it doesn't feel right to you, then maybe skip it. But I do personally like to think about theme. So, okay, we'll go back to my Scapple board. So this is just something new. So I started good versus evil because I'm thinking I'm doing warriors. I am doing maybe demons or demon-like creatures. Good versus evil is an obvious theme that pops up. I don't use Scapple a whole lot, but okay, there we go. That makes it a little bit bigger, and I can hardly see it. We have a question. Your inspiration was the world. Your long-range plan is to write YA and adult in the same world. Is that done? Yeah, I think, is it done? I think you can do it. There's no reason why you can't do it. And because there's so much crossover between people who read YA and people who read adult, that readers will love staying in the same world. Now, it depends, how adult is your adult? Do you want teens never to read it? But if you're clear, having one world with different kinds of stories in it is totally fine, I think. I think it might actually be fun for the readers to experience that. Something that came to me, like a birthright. What are you born to be? Is just an idea that came to me in terms of the story. And so this basically is just a program where I would just list out things that are coming to mind and put them on here. So like isolation, I envisioned my main character to be isolated a bit. Like found family is something that I want to play around with. I'm thinking about playing around with happiness versus sadness. And I might link things together in my mind map and try to, I think this is, make everything look the same. But I really just start throwing out words and terms and things that I'm interested in and things that intrigue me. And I want to, in like rabbit holes, I want to go into and stick them on some kind of mind mapping tool. I do this by hand a lot also. So we have another question from Jenny. In YA contemporary works, is it okay to use names of songs musicians from the current decade or year? I think you do have to be careful about that because it will date it. If your story is taking place for a purpose in 2023 or 2015, and you want everything, you want it to be a capsule of that time, that's fine. But yeah, do understand that if you choose to use that, it will definitely date it. And depending on how you publish, if you want to do traditional publishing, any book you write now, let's say you sold it, even now it's not coming out for a year and a half, 2 years. So, but people do it. And I think that, and if you're self-publishing, then it's, things come out faster. There's not a problem with it. Like something being dated, it's not necessarily a kiss of death or anything. It's just, it's of now, it's of the moment. Sometimes we can't help that. Like you were talking about, if you wrote a book in the 90s and someone had a sidekick or, a pager or something, yes, it's dated, but like, it's not necessarily a problem. You know what I mean? It just depends on, how you want to publish, how you're thinking about your work and things like that. Yeah, the mind mapping tool can be really, you can discover things that you didn't know. So I'll just do a couple more. So I'm thinking of this like demon-like creature. I'll just call it that. Spell it. And that was weird. I'll link that to here. And then maybe like, do I need an angel-like creature? Is that what my heroine is? I literally just thought of that just now. So mind mapping can just free, no judgment, anything that comes to mind. Link it, don't link it. I will show you. I started one in Whimsical earlier, and I'll just show you really quickly because I thought might be helpful. There we go. So Whimsical, just the software doesn't let you randomly, like the way Scapple did, let me kind of any box I could link to any other box. This one is a little bit more, it's got different rules, but so everything kind of has to come out to the side. But like I was thinking, isolation, found family, is she a changeling? Happiness, depression, a mystery revealed. What are the clues? Warriors, are they reluctant warriors? How people treat each other, hidden birthright, that kind of links to that. So this is just an example of a few minutes of mind mapping that I was doing a little earlier. So I recommend that to just open your mind up. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was inspiration. So we have gone through sort of brainstorming the world building and the world building elements, mind mapping. Now it comes to the point that I was mentioning earlier, where as you go out into the world, you are going to watch television and movies, listen to music, and things are going to start like popping. You're going to start seeing things like, oh, I can use that. Oh, that's interesting. And I advise to try to be purposeful about that. I like to create a Spotify playlist, and a lot of times I'll have a song in mind it's based on like the aesthetic. So if we're talking about an alternate 1950s world, is there music from the 50s that might, inspire me? And if I put that into Spotify or Pandora and then let it suggest music based like that's similar to that, I can also find songs. If are there movies and TV shows that I can watch? So right now on my inspiration list, I'm going to rewatch the TV show Pushing Daisies, which is not really 1950s, although it's got this weird kitschy aesthetic. So I think that it's got the aesthetic. Like if this was a movie, I would kind of want it to look like Pushing Daisies. It's a very like cozy feel to it. Now, how I'm going to incorporate the demons, I know it's going to be interesting, but in terms of mind mapping, Simple Mind, which is not free, Deb, sorry, said that she uses, yeah, like Snapple, Scapple. Scapple is the first software that I showed you, which is not free. Whimsical has a free plan. Miro has a free plan that a lot of times you can use. And then Wanderingland uses newsprint, doing it by hand. I often do this by hand as well. I kind of go back and forth between doing it by hand and doing it on the computer. So sometimes writing by hand does just open up a different part of your brain. And yeah, Pushing Daisies is on Max, HBO Max, I found it, so, yeah, that's gonna be, like, my weekend viewing, only 2 seasons, and I don't remember if I ever watched the end, so no spoilers, but I'm gonna plan to binge as much of it as possible, and hopefully it will fill my mind with some kind of inspiration, whether it's aesthetic or, like I've written entire stories that are essentially fanfic, like changing the ending of a television episode, so you never know where the inspiration will come from. And, ooh, Why Women Kill for the 50s aesthetic. Thank you, I appreciate that. I will look that up. So that is basically yeah, that's the total of what I have for you this evening to start building your story's world. If you have any questions, definitely let me know in the comments. And also, how might you be planning to kickstart your inspiration? Do you have an idea of like playlists or movies you can watch that might have something, an aesthetic, a vibe, similar to your story? Um, and if you don't know, maybe ask people like, put like, do you know of Regency ghost stories that I could read or watch or listen to? You're all very welcome. Yeah, I hope this is helpful. And let's see. I don't know if I have anything else. You probably already have the world building checklist. If not, link is in the description to kind of go through it. We're going to talk next time about building the character and the plot along with the world and moving towards the first draft of the outline next week also. So, how do you connect your character's inner vibe or tone to the world? That is actually a really good question. I think that part of the writing is like the tone, hopefully, of the world will reflect your character. Um, Unless there's a really part of the story that you're telling is that it clashes in some way. Like, is your character out of step with their world? And is that part of the story that you're telling? Or is it all one kind of cohesive thing and everybody has the same vibe? So when you're building it all together, once you decide on your aesthetic or the vibe that you have, I think it will come through in the the writing of the character as you're constructing it. So hopefully that makes sense. Like you're creating a whole cohesive story, and so everything is working together. So even if you're say you have this 1950s vibe, and your character is an outcast or is just marching to the beat of their own drummer, they have a totally different aesthetic or a vibe. Then that tells you a lot about how that character is going to be. Well, it could tell you a lot about you could have a story where this outcast character is actually an outcast, or our world is so, not encompassing, but it's like our world is warm and is inclusive of differences. And so they're just like, oh, that's just Jane. I can literally not think of any other names. That's just Jane. She just marches to the beat of her own drummer. We accept her anyway. Or is it like, oh no, Jane's weird. We are making, warding off evil because we can't accept her. So there's different ways that you can do it, but I do think that once if you have a kind of a literary aesthetic in mind, then you're going to be making choices that are in line with that. Hopefully that helps and makes sense. If anyone has any Regency ghost story recommendations for Dragon Maiden, I do not at the moment. I will think of it and I will let you know. Call the Midwife. My mother is obsessed with Call the Midwife. That's and Marvelous Miss Maisel are 1950ish. Thank you. Cool. All right. So I think that's it for tonight. I will hopefully see you next Monday, same time, same place. Welcome to everyone on the replay. And yeah, take some time, mind map, brainstorm, and we will get into more character and plot and more world next time. Thanks a lot, y'all.